Hello, Gavin Hoey here with another Photoshop tutorial. This week I'm going to show you how you can wrap a texture or a pattern around an object. So this is the picture we're hopefully going to end up with, or something vaguely similar to it. It's a picture of my hand and I've wrapped a Union Jack around it. So how do we do that? Well, let's go right back to the beginning. I've got the first images that I used here. This is a picture of my hand, of course, and I've cut it out from the background just to save a bit of time. Now, I've also got a picture of a Union Jack. It's just a straightforward graphic, nothing clever. So we're going to get a move tool and we'll drag the hand and drop it onto the Union Jack, like so. Okay, we can close the hand down, we don't need it anymore. But you can see it's kind of floating in the air, so we need to do a bit of repositioning with this, and for that I'm going to use Free Transform and just drag it and put it in the right place. Now, it's important that you get this positioned where you'd like it to end up, right at the beginning, because it's not something you can change later on, so you've got to be happy with it now. Okay, so I'm happy with that, that's in the right place. So how do we wrap this Union Jack around the hand? Well, we're going to use one of Photoshop's oldest filters, and you'll find it under Filter and Distort and Displace. Now, the Displace filter has to be, without question, the least intuitive and least helpful filter inside of Photoshop, and there's a lot of competition for that prize, but I reckon this one wins, because when you load it up you get this little box here which really doesn't tell you anything, and then if you click OK it asks you to load a displacement map. Now, what on earth are displacement maps and how do you load them? Okay, well, let's cancel that and go back to the beginning, because we need to do a bit of work to produce a displacement map. And what the displacement map does is to bend, in our case the Union Jack, into the shape and contours of the object, in our case my hand. Right, so let's close down the Union Jack layer, we don't need that for now, so we're only having the object, my hand, visible. Now we really need a black and white version of this, so let's get rid of the colour, Image, Adjustments and Desaturate. And we really want a really good contrasty version of this as well. So back to Image, Adjustment and Levels. Because what the displacement map does is to look at the tones in the picture. So where it finds a good black, it'll push the pixels in one direction. Where it finds a good white, it'll push the pixels in another. And where it finds a mid-grey, it'll leave them untouched. So if we bump up the contrast, we can get rid of that sort of greyish tone to the hand and have an image that has a lot more contrast in it, like so. So now we have some really deep blacks, some really bright whites, and not that many grey tones. Okay, so we can click OK. And there's one last thing we need to do to this map as well, and that's go back to Filter, choose Blur and Gaussian Blur. Because at the moment it's a dead sharp image, and that's fine, but it does tend to make your distorted image, your flag in my case, look a little bit sort of jaggedy. So we want it a little bit smoother than that. So I'm going to put the radius, anything between about 5 and 10 pixels works pretty well. So I'm going to put mine up to about 9 pixels. By trial and error, I found that to be about the right setting. Right, now we need to save this. So we'll go to File, choose Save As, and call it something other than the current name. I like to call mine Map, so I know exactly what this is. This is going to be a displacement map. And save it somewhere that you're going to remember where it is. Okay, that's fine. Right, so that's made the displacement map. Let's go back to our layers, and we're going to go for undo a few steps. So we're going to step backwards, edit, step backwards again, until we get back to the hand the way it was before we started fiddling with it. Now we're also going to make a copy of that Union Jack by making a copy of the layer and popping it at the top above the hand and turning it on. So let's go up to Filter, back to Distort and back to Displace. So we're ready to displace this Union Jack. Now we get down to the scale, horizontal and vertical. The default settings are 10 on each. Basically, the bigger the numbers you put in here, the more effect the displacement map will have. So the more it'll push the pixels out of the way. Now, there are no hard and fast rules with this. Depends on the texture you're using and the object you're trying to wrap around. Now, I find around about 25 works a little bit better than 10. And I find that a good place to start. Basically, when you apply this map, if you find the effect is too strong, lower the numbers. If the effect is too weak, raise the numbers. Pretty simple, really. Click OK, and it'll ask you to load the displacement map. Now here it is. I called it map, so I can find it again, and click open. And away it goes. And it distorts the object, or the shape, in our case the Union Jack, and it's all gone sort of squidgy and, well, frankly, just a little bit weird. So how do we get this to wrap over the hand now? Well, our hand is still there. I'm going to load this up as a selection. You could use the magic wand and just select the no pixel area. I'm just going to hold Control or Command on the Mac and click the layer thumbnail, and that loads in a selection. Okay, come back to our distorted flag. I'm going to put a layer mask on there by clicking the layer mask icon, and there you go. It just chops out the bits we don't need, and now it's in the shape of my hand. To get these two layers to work well, we need to change the blend modes. Currently the blend mode is set to normal. There's a few you might want to try. Multiply is pretty successful most of the time, but sometimes, and in this case I find it's just a little bit on the dark side. So I'm going to try overlay instead, and I find that works for me a little bit better. So that's the basic technique done, and if we have a good close look at the hand itself, we can see how the Union Jack has been twisted and distorted so it fits in better with the contours of the hand. It's not overly convincing yet. We just need to do a little bit more work. First thing I'm going to do is drop the opacity down to about 70–80%, somewhere like that, so we can see a bit more of the hand coming back through. Now I'm also going to go up to Filter and choose Blur and Gaussian Blur. Because this flag doesn't have any texture, it's just a graphic. We're going to get the texture from the hand, and we're going to blur it ever so slightly, just a few pixels, just so it blends in. Now it does help, of course, to work on the actual image and not the layer mask. Whoopsie, nearly made a mistake. Let's try that again. Gaussian blur, there we are, now it's actually working. Okay, and we'll just blend that in like so. Now lastly, I'm going to come back down to the hand itself and go up to Image, Adjustment and Levels, and put a bit more punch, a bit more contrast into that hand, because it's just a little bit underexposed, maybe, like so. There you go. Great, okay, so that's now working really well. Let's just zoom in a little bit. Yeah, you can now start to see that that bends with the contours of the hands. It's picking up all the little bends and twists in the skin there. That's looking really good indeed. So now all I need to do is just put it onto a new background, and because I've had various comments in the past saying, well, we don't see how you do the background, I'll show you how I did this one. So I've still got my original background Union Jack, and I'm going to put a new empty layer and put it just above the Union Jack and fill that with white. So change my foreground colour to white, edit and fill it with the foreground colour. Now, so we can see a little bit of that flag in the background, I'm just going to get the eraser tool, get a nice big huge eraser brush and chop a little hole like so, and you get a sort of center spot clear effect. Finally, working on the bottom flag, I'm just going to go back to Filter, Blur and Gaussian Blur just to blur the flag out of focus like so, so we get a sort of sense of depth of field there. Lovely, there you go. And for a final touch, I think we'll just do a bit of edit and free transform, and we'll stretch that flag out so it's not exactly in register with the hand. Perfect. Okay, so there we go. There's how you wrap a texture or a shape around an object.